And the way you open up that article, I thought was so provocative. It's like, just imagine if there was a
Yeah.
documentary made by a carnivore who's been carnivore for 40 years. He's taken money from the beef industry
From
and he
Cargill.
gets
Yeah. Like his whole
Bob's,
center is underwritten by Cargill. Let's just imagine.
and he makes a documentary that's pro meat. What do you think would happen in that scenario? The world would go ballistic.
Yeah. And actually, as I put in that article, like there was an example of a paper that came out that was basically exonerated red meat. It was the most rigorous review of red meat that had ever been done. It came out in the Annals of Internal Medicine. The scientist involved in that, even they sort of invented a conflict of interest that he really didn't even have. Like they said, oh, you didn't disclose this grant from, actually it was like a trade association with 38 members, two of which were beef producers. They're like, oh, you were influenced by the beef industry. It was for a different paper, that grant. Like they just invented this conflict of interest and raked him over the coals, huge articles trying to discredit him. And yeah, because they had done this super rigorous level review of red meat and said red meat, we cannot find the evidence to, we can't find any amount or of high quality evidence to criticize red to convict red meat of causing any kind of disease. And they looked at cancer, heart disease, metabolic diseases, like any metabolic markers that imply obesity, diabetes. So yeah, there's really, I've never seen that happen to a plant-based diet uh, nutritionist, even though many of them have just so many conflicts of interest. Harvard's Walter Willett, I wrote also a piece on him because he's in a similar situation. Nobody ever talks about his conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just the state of play in nutrition today, which is that there's a heavy, like a super strong bias towards a plant-based diet. And I mean, as you know, as everybody knows listening to this, and it's I think it's because the media is so bought into this, we just don't see any good reporting on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. If we talk about the study itself, you have to first find an article that links to the study. I spent an entire afternoon reading through the entire study. Even then,
Yeah.
you have to click on the supplements. There's like two supplemental articles that are each like 30, 40 pages long. And then you start to get to the data and the graphs and see everything and make sense of it all. When I was looking at the study, the study itself to me is like nothing. It's like you said, like, yes, your LDL cholesterol is going to go down on a plant-based diet. This is an 8-week study. The last 4 weeks, they're responsible for feeding themselves. So you don't actually know what they were eating. Even when they were being provided food
Yeah.
for the first 4 weeks, you don't know whether they're eating it or not. There were different compliance numbers. And then there's all this stuff that they measure that is getting worse, but they don't focus on it. Like the study to me said nothing. But yet, like you watch this documentary and these quote unquote nutrition experts are like, this is the definitive twin study that shows us everything we need to know about nutrition. It's like there's no real data here. It doesn't really say hardly anything.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the HDL cholesterol got worse in the vegan twins, even though that was borderline statistically significant. So that was one. The other, I think, very significant result was that their B12, uh, which is a crucial vitamin for neurological health, and I mean that plummeted by like 63%, I think, on um, on the vegan diet, and which just reminds you the vegan diet is nutritionally insufficient. Like it just doesn't supply numerous key nutrients. And like nutrition seems boring to talk about nutrients, but they're essential for a reason. They are essential for your health, and a vegan diet doesn't provide them. So here we see these vegans, their B12 plummeting. They didn't look at other things that are also unavailable in a vegan diet, like, or hardly available, like DHA, EPA, the omega-6 fatty acids, the um, vitamin A, other B vitamins. But it's not nutritionally sufficient, and it really, like, I don't even think it should be past an ethical approval to feed people a nutritionally insufficient diet for an experiment. But another another issue. Let's see, what else do we find in the study? we found that he says that people didn't eat. Oh, I know. One of the reasons that people look better on the vegan diet, I think their glucose looked better. Oh, bet they had better fasting insulin, and they lost 4.2 pounds more on the vegan twins compared to the omnivore twins. We don't really know why those differences were there, but one possible explanation is that the vegans recorded eating less sugar than the omnivores did, and about 180 calories fewer per day. So that's pretty significant. Even though they weren't told to try to lose weight, but it's possible the vegan twins ate less because they all like consistently reported they had lower diet satisfaction, as reported in a 5-question survey, compared to the omnivore twins. So they really didn't like their diets as much, which is another problem I think for the vegan diet. But and then I also point out the fact that Christopher Gardner, he actually, and this is really seems like a small thing but is a big deal. Everybody who does a clinical trial has to submit a protocol for that trial to the National Institute of Health, and I went and looked at that protocol, and you have to follow that protocol, because if you don't, it means if you change your endpoints, like what you're measuring at the outcome of a study, that means if you don't follow your protocol, what you say you're going to do beforehand, it means that you're cherry picking, essentially. When you choose different ones at the outcome, you might just choose the ones that look good and ignore the ones that look bad, which is what Christopher Gardner did. He switched the measures that he reported in his paper. It was not consistent with his original protocol. So, but as you say, even with all of those criticisms, the main thing is 2 months long just doesn't tell you much. Very selective outcome measures. And, I think it was a pretty well-controlled trial. They did feed people. They provided all the food to people in the first month. So people really knew what to eat. It's better than just like giving people a diet book and some counseling. That was impressive. But it's just too short to get meaningful outcomes. And they looked at too few outcome markers.
Yeah. Well, I don't have the data in front of me, but one of the things I read on the note that you said, how many people are like going to continue doing this? The question that was asked, like, will you definitely continue eating this way? And the vegan group, 22 people, there was one single person that said that they were definitely confident that they were going to continue doing that. And it's interesting, I wonder why they chose certain metrics like B12. Like if Chris Gardner was so good at knowing how to do studies, why would you study B12? That's going to drop on a vegan diet. And they highlight it. And the other thing that was really interesting about weight is they make all these people do DEXA scans, and they show that in the documentary. Like, why would you want anybody to know that? You would want people to focus on weight because, yes, the vegans lost more weight. They show very clearly in the documentary that they lost muscle. They lost more muscle than the
Vegans lost
omnivores.
more muscle. That's right,
Yes.
they did. Well, I mean, got to credit them. They showed some negative results. I mean, it's like that's, I think, impressive that they did show the negative aspects of the vegan. I think you do lose more muscle on that because you're not eating enough protein. I mean, you cannot get it's very, very hard to get complete proteins on a vegan diet.
Yep.
So muscle loss, muscle loss will inevitably result from that.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know why he did that. Interesting. I didn't know they did those scans.
That's what was included. It wasn't included in the original study, and that's where things get a little bit convoluted. It's almost like the microbiome. In the study itself, they collected stool, but they didn't measure anything. In the documentary, they show that the microbiome is more diverse on a vegan diet, which again,
Right.
of course it would be, but we don't know anything about the microbiome. Like, is more
No.
diverse better? We have no idea. But that's what shows up on the documentary side of things that they didn't have any data on as far as the study itself went.
Right. And those were not on the original protocol. I can tell you that much. I can tell you. So I don't know. I mean, the question that's at the top of my piece on this is like, is this science or a PR stunt?
Yeah.
And I think all of my reporting concludes really the latter. I mean, given the conflicts of interest, given the ideologies that are driving this to begin with, given the poor state of the science from somebody who knows how to do better science, I think and given that he runs an advocacy center, a clear advocacy center, I think you can only conclude this was a PR stunt.
Yep.
So, and I think these Netflix documentaries are so influential. I mean, I'm sure you, like me, have just heard from so many people who changed their diet after watching Game Changers,
Yes.
or before that, What the Health, that came out maybe 2015. It truly persuaded a lot of people to go vegan. But I think we're now seeing, and I may be deceiving myself in this, but I think we are now seeing like a loss of interest in the vegan diet. And because all of those fake food companies, Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger, Oatly, I mean, that whole sector has tanked, really tanked. And they have never made money. They don't do well. People never took to their products. People reporting, we just had Veganuary, for January, and numbers were much less enthusiasm, much smaller. I don't think I think we've it doesn't mean that the plant-based diet is going away, because actually I think what's happening is that there's been a shift to try to impose it through policy, like to try to push it on people as a policy. Like at the United Nations level, they're trying to push the Eat Lancet diet, which allows this much meat a day. Like that's the amount of meat you're allowed per
Quarter
day.
size.
Um, to try to impose that, in national guidelines across the world, to try to put it into European food policy. There are really heavy-handed policies to try to eliminate farms and eliminate livestock and buy out farmers. And that's part of why you see all these farmer protests going on in Europe right now. There's really a war on farmers and ranchers, to try to eliminate our natural food supply. In the US dietary guidelines, we're just coming out with an article soon in the Nutrition Coalition documenting how they're trying to erode the protein category to try to diminish the amount of natural animal proteins, which are the most bioavailable and the most complete, and allow substitutions by inadequate plant-based proteins instead. So in the beverage category, having soy, oat, almond milk replace real milk. And I mean, those others aren't even milks, they're like technically juices. And just to have beans, peas, lentils replace meat. So those are all moves. So what I'm saying is I think that the plant-based movement is less consumer focused now, maybe because it hasn't worked, or maybe they've just decided we'll just go top down and that'll be more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's definitely, they just keep doubling down. The Tufts food compass we talked about last time, it just gets dumber and dumber every time. Like I'm just hoping that it gets so dumb at some point that, like, at some point, common sense, like, please, like, a fried egg is not worse for you than a name brand sugar cereal. Like, give me a break. Anyway, the twin study, we see the data, LDL cholesterol goes down by a little bit. No real evidence that that's a good thing or a bad thing. HDL cholesterol goes down. We know that's a bad thing. Triglycerides go up. We know that's a bad thing. They don't highlight
Right.
those. The glucose did go up, even though fasting insulin did go down. They collected information somehow about telomeres, which I don't know exactly what they
We
did.
haven't published on that yet. That's related, supposedly, questionably related to longevity, but I think they will have a paper coming out saying that the vegan diet contributes to longevity. That's my expectation.
They argue that in the documentary, and I don't know how they can even claim that. But like, they present the data from the group to the whole group, and it's all feigned. You can tell, like, this is made for Netflix. It's not like them receiving the clinical data. And they show that telomere length lengthened in 8 weeks, in just 8 weeks, on a vegan diet, where on the omnivore group it stayed the same. And again, I don't know how you measure that. I don't know what it says, even what that tells us. But then you cut to the twins, and the omnivore twin is like, wow, my telomeres are getting shorter. It's like, no, they didn't say they were getting shorter. They just said they stayed the same.